When I first read your book, and in the book you say that the average American pays 34.5%
Yeah.
of every net dollar that they earn.
Yes.
The first thing that I think about, because of the way that I was trained at that time, is I'm not paying 34.5% interest rate.
Well, of course not, but it's volume. It's, you see people confuse rates and volume. Rates don't mean a cotton picking thing, relatively speaking. How much is the volume of things? And so what I saw was that the typical American public today has been made a slave by the bankers by, low interest rates and so forth. And now it's everything is financed. And so
Right.
they quit saving because they said, the bank says, I'm going to take care of you.
Right.
Yeah, they took care of you all right. They made slave out of you.
That's right.
Well, so I just took the car buyer and typical financing package is 4 years, but the 95% of the cars traded in are not paid for. I know all about this. I've spent all time researching this sort of stuff. Well, I looked at the mortgage and so forth and went through the same exercise. The typical mortgage only stays on the books 5 years. Mm-hmm. And then they go to another mortgage, which is usually bigger and so forth. And that the Bank of America and boat payments and stuff like that would rival the amount of interest paid on cars. So you add them all up, it's 34.5. And I've had any number of people challenge me on that. And I said, well, go do your own third grade arithmetic and report back to me. And I never had a single one that didn't say you understated the case.
Right. You know, what's interesting, Nelson, is I was reviewing some notes that I had from Tony Robbins' book from a few years ago called Money Master the Game. Yeah. And I don't agree with everything in his book because he talks and touts a low cost 401k, which we can talk a little bit about qualified plans in a minute. But he echoes the same exact number that you came up with as 34.5% of every net dollar that Americans pay out, the average American. So that number is like you said, it's third grade arithmetic. You do the research and you find it out. But here's the thing that people don't realize, and one of the examples that we show people with Create Tailwind, we show them in our initial consultation or on our initial webinar, is we show people that on a $300,000 mortgage over 30 years, you're going to pay about 48 cents of every dollar that you pay to the bank goes to the bank's benefit and 52 cents goes to your benefit. Now, I like to ask people, Nelson, if you earned $1 and you got to give me half of it, do you care what your interest rate is? And you know what some people say? They say, yeah, I care what my interest rate is. And I have to say, well, wait a minute, let's go back. We got to go back. You missed something, right? And and you point out that if we're taught to save 10% of what we earn, and we're paying out 34.5 cents to somebody else, then aren't we a slave? Now, I remember I had two African-American doctors sitting in my conference room one day with one of my associates, Jim Anderson, and I said to them that exact same thing. I said, aren't you a slave? And I thought, man, that's not going to go over very well with these two doctors. They're going to look at me like I'm crazy, but they looked at me and they said, wow.
Yeah.
Because it's once you see and once you understand what's happening, you'll know what to do. So now that we understand that we have this volume of interest problem and that we have to stop doing this or we will just remain a slave for the rest of our lives. And when they put us 6 feet under in the ground, that we just look back and say we were a slave. But how do people become their own banker? What's the first step that somebody needs to do to break away from that system?
It's a mindset. You see, these guys, the bankers, so forth, they have created a problem in people's mind, and they've taken over their minds. Do you know who Lenny Riefenstahl was?
No.
She was the gal who did the propaganda films for Hitler.
Wow. Okay.
She lived to be 101. She was a great gal. And there's a quotation I'm putting in this month's banknotes. She says, propaganda will always work if you let it.
Right.
If you let it. And see, that's what has happened to people. They have been talked into this sort of stuff by evil people. See, here's my friend Walter Williams at George Mason University. I've been knowing Walter 35 years or so. Great guy. He's always said half the kids in college should not be in college. And so, you know, here's this mindset that everybody's got to go to college. And it's nonsense.
Yeah.
Well, also, here's this goal that we got to have of everybody should be a homeowner.
Right.
Well, the definition of a homeowner inside the Beltway at Washington, D.C. is you have a title to a piece of property, but you owe 1.5 times what it's worth.
Right.
That's homeownership. Well, that's a deception that's out there. And this is a manifestation of the secret elite that started back there in 1890.